I remember the day my life took a turn I never saw coming. It was a rainy Thursday evening when my wife, Sarah, casually dropped the bombshell that would forever alter the course of our marriage. We were sitting at our kitchen table, a place that had seen countless conversations, laughter, and plans for the future. The warm glow of the overhead light contrasted sharply with the cold dread that settled in my stomach as I listened to her words. "Maybe we should consider an open marriage," she said, her voice calm and steady, as if she were discussing the weather instead of the foundation of our relationship. At that moment, it felt like time stood still. I blinked, trying to process what I had just heard. Shock coursed through me, followed closely by confusion and an overwhelming sense of betrayal. My heart raced and my mind spun with questions. How could she suggest this? Did she not see the love we had built over the years? Before this moment, Sarah and I had what I thought was a solid marriage. We had been together for over a decade, navigating the ups and downs of life as a team. We had shared dreams of a family, built a cozy home, and created a life that felt, at least to me, fulfilling. But now those memories felt like a distant dream, overshadowed by the reality of her suggestion. Was this a sign of deeper issues I had chosen to ignore? As I sat across from her, my mind raced through moments we had shared, late-night talks, vacations, the way she laughed at my terrible jokes. I felt a churning storm inside me as I struggled to comprehend her proposal. Did she want this because she was unhappy, or was it simply a way to justify something else? An open marriage. I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. "What do you mean by that?" She leaned back in her chair, her expression unyielding. "It means we can see other people. It could be a way to explore our desires without completely losing what we have." Her words struck me like a slap in the face. "Are you suggesting this because you want to be with someone else?" I asked, my voice rising, the hurt spilling out. "It's not about that," she insisted, her eyes searching mine for understanding. "It's about freedom, about being honest with ourselves. I think it could help us grow." I took a deep breath, my heart pounding as I considered her proposal. What if this was the key to saving us? But deep down, a voice whispered that this was the beginning of the end. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was her way of justifying an affair she was already having. As I sat in silence, 1,000 emotions swirled within me: anger, sadness, confusion. I wanted to scream, to tell her that this was wrong, that love should be about commitment and trust, not open doors to other partners. Yet I also felt a flicker of curiosity. Could this be a way to salvage our marriage? In that moment, I realized I was standing at a precipice. I could either push back against her suggestion, digging my heels in to protect what we had, or I could entertain the idea, allowing myself to explore the unknown. But as I looked into her eyes, searching for the woman I once knew, all I saw was a stranger. I needed time to think. I needed to understand what this meant. For us, for our future. But one thing was clear: my world had just tilted on its axis, and I was left to navigate a path I never wanted to tread. In the days following Sarah's proposal, my mind was a battleground. I oscillated between disbelief and an unsettling curiosity. I found myself replaying our conversations, searching for clues that might explain how we had arrived at this point. Had I missed the signs? Was this a culmination of years of unspoken dissatisfaction? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that our marriage had not been as perfect as I had once believed. There had been whispers of tension, moments when we both seemed distracted, lost in our own worlds. I recalled the late nights Sarah had spent at work, the way she would come home exhausted, her mind seemingly elsewhere. I had chalked it up to the demands of her job, but now I wondered if there was more to it. Had she been emotionally distancing herself from me, seeking validation or excitement elsewhere? The idea of an open marriage gnawed at me. I tried to reason through it, weighing the pros and cons. On one hand, the notion of freedom sounded liberating. It could allow us to explore our desires without the constraints of traditional monogamy. Maybe we could even learn something new about ourselves, reigniting the spark that had dimmed over the years. But on the other hand, the potential for heartbreak loomed large. I imagined Sarah with someone else, laughing, sharing intimate moments that were once ours alone. The thought twisted my stomach into knots. How could I agree to something that could potentially lead to her falling in love with another man? The very idea felt like a betrayal of our vows, a violation of the trust we had built over the years. As I wrestled with these conflicting emotions, I found myself retreating into my own mind, isolating myself from Sarah. I couldn't bring myself to talk to her about how I felt. I feared that any expression of doubt would only push her further away. Instead, I buried myself in work, throwing myself into projects that required my full attention. But even at the office, the nagging thoughts of our marriage and her proposal followed me like a shadow. One evening, after a particularly long day, I returned home to find Sarah waiting for me in the living room. She looked beautiful, her hair cascading over her shoulders, but I couldn't shake the feeling of disconnection that hung between us. "Hey," she said softly, her eyes searching mine. "Have you thought more about what I suggested?" I hesitated, feeling the weight of her expectations pressing down on me. "I have," I replied cautiously, "but I'm still trying to understand how it could work for us." Her expression shifted, a flicker of frustration crossing her face. "I thought you might be open to it. I know this is a lot to digest, but I believe it could help us." "Help us?" I echoed, a bitter edge creeping into my voice. "Or help you?" I could see the hurt in her eyes, but the truth was I felt cornered. I wasn't ready to accept this new reality, yet I didn't want to lose her. "Look, I'm not suggesting this because I want to leave you," she insisted, her voice rising slightly. "I just think we need to explore what we want. We can't keep pretending everything is perfect. Maybe we should be working on our issues instead of opening the door to potential heartbreak." I countered, frustration spilling over. She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I thought you would understand. I thought you trusted me." Trust. That word hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I wanted to trust her, but how could I when she was asking for something so radical? "I don't know if I can do this," I finally admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm scared of what it could mean for us." She reached out, placing her hand on mine. "I'm scared too, but maybe that's a good thing. It means we're both invested in making this work." I looked into her eyes, searching for the woman I had fallen in love with, the one who had promised to stand by me through thick and thin. But now, I felt like I was staring at a stranger, someone who was willing to gamble our relationship on the whims of desire. As I pulled my hand away, I knew that I was edging closer to a decision. I didn't want to lose her, but I also didn't want to lose myself. In the process, the thought of her with someone else was unbearable, yet the fear of losing her entirely loomed larger. I needed to find clarity, to understand what I truly wanted. In the quiet of that moment, I made a choice that I hoped would lead to healing, though I feared it might also lead to heartbreak. The decision to agree to an open marriage felt like stepping off a cliff into the unknown. I had spent countless nights tossing and turning, weighing the pros and cons, and finally I had come to an uneasy acceptance of Sarah's proposal. I thought perhaps this was my chance to save our marriage, to breathe new life into a relationship that was beginning to feel stale. Yet as I sat across from her that evening preparing to voice my decision, a wave of anxiety washed over me. "Sarah," I began, my voice steady but laced with uncertainty, "I've thought a lot about what you suggested." Her eyes lit up with hope, and for a moment I felt a flicker of excitement. Maybe this could work. Maybe we could navigate this new territory together. "I'm willing to try," I continued, my heart pounding in my chest, "but I need to set some boundaries. We need to talk about what this means for both of us." Her smile widened, and I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. I had opened the door, but I didn't know what lay on the other side. "Absolutely," she agreed, leaning forward with enthusiasm. "We can establish rules. We can make sure we're both comfortable with this." We spent the next hour discussing what the open marriage would entail. We talked about boundaries, the types of relationships we were comfortable with, and how to communicate openly throughout the process. I felt a sense of camaraderie as we navigated this conversation, but the underlying tension never fully dissipated. In the days that followed, I tried to immerse myself in this new reality. I sought advice online, reading articles and forums about open relationships. Some people praised the arrangement as liberating, while others warned of the emotional pitfalls. I tried to focus on the positives, telling myself that this was an opportunity for growth. But as I watched Sarah prepare for her first date, anxiety gripped me like a vice. She stood in front, the mirror applying makeup, her excitement palpable. I couldn't help but feel like an intruder in my own life, an unwilling participant in a game I never wanted to play. "Are you sure you're okay with this?" she asked, catching my reflection in the mirror. I forced a smile, but inside my heart raced. "Yeah, I'm fine, just nervous, I guess." She stepped closer, placing a hand on my shoulder. "It's going to be okay. We're in this together, remember." I nodded, but the knot in my stomach tightened. I watched as she finished getting ready, the anticipation in her eyes contrasting sharply with the dread that weighed me down. When she left that evening, I felt a mix of relief and emptiness. I had agreed to this, and now I was left alone with my thoughts. I tried to distract myself, scrolling through social media and watching mindless television, but the reality of what was happening gnawed at me. As the hours passed, I found myself checking the clock, counting down the minutes until her return. I imagined her with someone else, laughing and sharing intimate moments that should have been ours. The thought twisted my stomach into knots. I wanted to believe that this was a healthy exploration of our desires, but deep down I feared I was opening Pandora's box. When she finally came home, I could see the glow of excitement in her eyes. She was bubbly, animated, recounting the details of her date with an enthusiasm that felt foreign. I listened, forcing myself to smile and nod as she shared stories about the man she had met. He was charming, adventurous, everything I felt I was. "His name is Mark," she said, her eyes sparkling. "We went to that new Italian place downtown. You would have loved it." I felt a pang of jealousy slice through me, but I buried it deep. "Sounds like a good time," I replied, my voice strained. As she continued to talk, I felt like a spectator in my own life. I wanted to support her, to be happy for her, but the reality of her excitement felt like a betrayal. I was supposed to be the one sharing those moments with her, not an outsider. That night, as we lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling, unable to shake the feeling of dread that had settled in my chest. Sarah curled up next to me, her warmth a stark contrast to the chill of uncertainty that enveloped me. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice soft and concerned. "Yeah, just thinking," I replied, trying to mask the turmoil within me. "About what?" "Just everything," I said, my heart racing. "This is all so new, and I want to make sure we're doing the right thing." She turned to face me, her expression earnest. "I promise we'll figure this out together. I love you, and I want us to be happy." Her words wrapped around me like a warm blanket, but they didn't quite reach the coldness in my heart. I wanted to believe her, but doubt lingered in the air between us. As I lay there, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a journey that might lead us down a path from which we couldn't return. I had opened the door to freedom, but I feared it would come at a cost I wasn't ready to pay. The weeks that followed Sarah's initial date with Mark were a blur of emotions. I had agreed to the open marriage, thinking it might help us reconnect, but instead I found myself spiraling deeper into a pit of anxiety and confusion. Each time Sarah came home from seeing him, I felt a mix of dread and forced acceptance. I tried to put on a brave face, to be supportive of her newfound freedom, but inside I was crumbling. I had convinced myself that I could handle this arrangement, that I could be the understanding husband who encouraged his wife to explore her desires. But the reality of her infidelity hit harder than I had anticipated. It was one thing to discuss the concept of an open marriage in theory, but living it was an entirely different beast. One evening, as I sat alone in the living room, I found myself scrolling through social media, trying to distract myself from the gnawing feeling in my gut. But every notification, every picture of couples celebrating their love, only deepened my sense of isolation. I felt like an outsider in my own home, a ghost watching a life that no longer felt like mine. When Sarah walked in, her face alight with excitement, I put on a smile, but it felt like a mask. "Hey, how was your day?" I asked, forcing the words out. "It was amazing," she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling. "Mark took me to this art exhibit and we had the best time. You would have loved it." As she spoke, I felt a familiar knot tighten in my chest. I wanted to be happy for her, but the thought of her sharing those moments with another man felt like a betrayal of everything we had built together. The more she talked about her experiences with Mark, the more I felt like I was losing her. "I'm glad you had fun," I said, my voice lacking the enthusiasm I wished I could muster. "Are you sure you're okay?" she asked, her brow furrowing with concern. "Yeah, I just need some time to adjust," I replied, trying to downplay my emotions. But the truth was, the adjustment was harder than I had ever imagined. I began to notice changes in our dynamic. The intimacy we once shared felt strained, and the conversations that used to flow so easily now felt forced. I found myself withdrawing, retreating into my own thoughts while Sarah seemed to thrive in her new lifestyle. One night after she returned from another date, I couldn't hold back any longer. "Sarah, can we talk?" I said, my heart racing as I braced myself for the conversation. "Of course," she replied, her eyes bright with anticipation. I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "I'm struggling with this whole open marriage thing," I admitted, my voice trembling. "I thought I could handle it, but it's harder than I expected." She nodded, her expression shifting to one of understanding. "I get that, it's a lot to take in, but I thought we were doing this to help each other grow." "I know," I said, feeling the weight of my emotions. "But every time you go out with Mark, it feels like you're slipping away from me. I'm scared of losing you." Her eyes softened as she reached for my hand. "You're not losing me. I love you, and this doesn't change that. I just want to explore this part of myself." "But what if this exploration leads you to someone else?" I pressed, my voice rising with desperation. "What if you end up falling in love with him?" She sighed, her expression pained. "I understand your fears, but I promise you my heart is still here with you. Mark is just a distraction." A distraction. The word stung like a slap. I wanted to believe her, but deep down I feared that the more she explored, the more she would realize that she wanted something different from our life together. As the conversation continued, I felt a mix of anger and sadness bubbling up within me. "How can you expect me to be okay with this when I'm the one left behind?" "I didn't mean for it to be this way," she said, her voice softening. "I wanted us to be happy, to find a way to keep our love alive while also exploring new connections. But what if it's tearing us apart instead?" I countered, my heart aching. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our words hanging heavy in the air. I could see the conflict in her eyes, the realization that this arrangement was not as simple as she had hoped. "I don't want to lose you either," she finally said, her voice breaking. "But I need this. I need to know that I can still be me, even within our marriage." As I looked at her, I felt a deep sense of sadness wash over me. I loved her, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing on shaky ground. The more she explored her desires, the more I felt like I was losing the woman I had married. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the darkness closing in around me. I felt trapped in a whirlwind of emotions: love, fear, jealousy, and uncertainty. I had opened the door to freedom, but I feared it would come at a cost I wasn't ready to pay. The days turned into weeks, and the reality of our open marriage began to sink in deeper. Each time Sarah returned from a date with Mark, I felt a little more of myself slip away. I tried to be supportive, to put on a brave face, but the facade was growing harder to maintain. I found myself caught in a cycle of anxiety and despair, while Sarah seemed to thrive in her newfound freedom. One evening I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when she walked in, her face flushed with excitement. "You won't believe what happened tonight," she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling. I forced a smile, though my heart sank at the thought of her enthusiasm being directed toward someone else. "What happened?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "I ran into Mark at a coffee shop," she said, practically bouncing on her toes. "We ended up spending hours talking about art and life. It was incredible." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Hearing her speak about him with such passion made my heart ache. "That's great," I said, though my voice lacked conviction. She must have sensed my discomfort because her expression faltered. "Are you okay?" "Honestly," I said, my voice coming out sharper than I intended. "No, I'm not okay. I feel like I'm losing you to him." Her face fell and she stepped closer, her eyes searching mine. "I don't want you to feel that way. You mean everything to me." "But it doesn't feel like it," I replied, my frustration boiling. Over every time you come home buzzing from a date, it's like a reminder that I'm not enough for you anymore. Stop it, she said, her tone firm but gentle. You are more than enough for me. This is about exploration, not replacement. But it feels like replacement. I shot back, the pain spilling over. You're sharing intimate moments with someone else, and I'm just supposed to be okay with it. Please just try to understand, she pleaded, her voice breaking. I never meant for it to hurt you. I thought we could find a way to make this work. I thought so too, I said, my voice trembling. But it's tearing me apart. I'm scared that this is going to change everything between us. We stood in silence, the weight of our words hanging heavy in the air. I could see the conflict in her eyes, the realization that our arrangement was not as simple as she had envisioned. In that moment, I felt a surge of clarity. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine while my heart was breaking. I need to know where we stand. I said, my voice steady but laced with vulnerability. Are you in this for us, or are you in this for you? She looked at me, her expression softening. I'm in this for us, I promise, but I also need to figure out who I am outside of our marriage. Her words cut deep. I understood the need for self-discovery, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this journey was pulling us further apart. I want you to be happy, but I also want us to be okay, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I want that too, she said, tears welling in her eyes. But I can't deny this part of myself. I thought opening our marriage might help us find a balance. As we stood there, I felt a wave of sadness wash over me. I loved her fiercely, but the fear of losing her to someone else was suffocating. What if we can't find that balance? I asked, my voice cracking. I don't know, she admitted, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. But I want to try. I don't want to lose you. In that moment, I realized that we were both standing on a precipice, teetering between love and loss. The open marriage had opened a door to exploration, but it had also exposed the cracks in our foundation. I needed to decide whether to continue down this path or to take a step back and reevaluate what we truly wanted from each other. That night, as I lay in bed beside her, I felt a sense of foreboding. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were drifting further apart, and I feared that the more Sarah explored her desires, the more she would realize that she wanted something different from our life together. The next day, I decided to confront the reality of our situation. I needed to know if Sarah was truly committed to our marriage, or if she was simply using it as a safety net while she sought fulfillment elsewhere. I called her at work, my heart racing as I waited for her to answer. Hey, can we talk tonight? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Of course, she replied, her tone light. Is everything okay? I just need to discuss our arrangement, I said, feeling the weight of my words. Sure, I'll be home around 6, she said, and I could hear the hint of concern in her voice. As I hung up, I felt a mix of fear and determination. I needed to lay everything on the table to confront the reality of our situation and figure out where we stood. That evening, as we sat across from each other at the kitchen table, I felt a heavy silence envelop us. Sarah looked nervous, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of the tablecloth. Thanks for coming home early, I said, trying to ease the tension. Of course. What's on your mind? She asked, her eyes searching mine. I've been doing a lot of thinking and I need to be honest with you, I said, my heart racing. I'm struggling with this open marriage, it's tearing me apart and I don't know how much longer I can handle it. Her expression shifted, a mixture of concern and understanding crossing her face. I appreciate your honesty. I've been feeling the strain too. Then let's talk about it, I urged. What do we want? Where do we see this going? As we delved into the conversation, I felt a sense of urgency. I needed to know if we could find a way to navigate this together or if we were destined to drift apart. The air was thick with tension, but I knew we had to confront the truth head-on. The conversation that evening was one of the hardest I had ever had. As I looked into Sarah's eyes, I could see a mix of fear and uncertainty mirrored in my own. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything that had transpired between us. Sarah, I began, trying to keep my voice steady, I think we need to reevaluate what this open marriage means for us. I can't keep pretending that I'm okay with you going out with Mark while I'm left here feeling like a shadow in my own life. She nodded slowly, her expression serious. I've sensed that you've been struggling, and I've been trying to figure out how to navigate my feelings too. It's been overwhelming. I thought this would help us grow, but instead it feels like it's driving a wedge between us. I admitted, my heart racing. I love you, but I can't shake the feeling that this is pulling us apart instead of bringing us together. Tears welled in her eyes, and she reached across the table, taking my hand in hers. I never wanted to hurt you. I thought this could be a way for us to find ourselves while still being together, but I can see now that it hasn't worked out like I hoped. I squeezed her hand, feeling the warmth of her touch. I want you to be happy, but I also need to feel secure in our relationship. I don't want to lose what we have. What if we set some boundaries? She suggested, her voice trembling. What if we take a step back from the open marriage and focus on us? I don't want to lose you either. The idea hung in the air, heavy with possibility. But does that mean you're willing to let go of Mark? I asked, my heart pounding. She hesitated, her eyes searching mine. I think I need to. I don't want to lose you. And I realize now that I might have rushed into this without considering the consequences. A wave of relief washed over me, but I knew that this was only the beginning of a long road ahead. If we're going to make this work, we need to communicate openly and honestly, I said, my voice firm. We have to be willing to confront our fears and insecurities together. I agree, she said, wiping away a tear. I want to work on us to rebuild the trust that feels shaken right now. I love you, and I want to find a way to make this right. As we sat there, holding hands across the table, I felt a glimmer of hope. It wouldn't be easy, but I believed that we could find our way back to each other. We had built a life together, and I wasn't ready to let it slip away without a fight. In the days that followed, we began to make changes. We set boundaries around our relationship and agreed to take a break from the open marriage arrangement. Sarah reached out to Mark, and though it was painful, she explained that she needed to focus on her marriage. I could see the relief in her eyes as she took that step, and it gave me hope that we could reestablish what we had lost. We spent more time together, reconnecting in ways that had felt distant for so long. We went on dates, revisited old hobbies, and engaged in deep conversations about our hopes and fears. I learned to express my feelings without fear of judgment, and she opened up about her own insecurities and desires. It was a slow process, but with each passing day, I felt the bonds of our love grow stronger. We were learning to communicate, to be vulnerable with each other, and to cherish the commitment we had made. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, I turned to Sarah. I'm grateful for this time we've had to reconnect. I realize now that love is not just about the good times. It's also about navigating the challenges together. She smiled, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. I've learned so much about myself and us through this experience. I never want to take our love for granted again. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt a renewed sense of hope. We had faced the storm and emerged stronger on the other side. I knew that challenges would continue to arise, but I was confident that we could face them together, hand in hand. In the end, I learned that love is not about possession or freedom. It's about trust, communication, and the willingness to grow together. I had opened the door to a new chapter in our relationship, and while it had been a painful journey, it ultimately led us back to each other. As I sat there holding Sarah close, I realized that love is a journey, one that requires constant effort and understanding. And as long as we were willing to walk it together, I believed we could weather any storm that came our way. With that thought in mind, I leaned in and kissed her softly, grateful for the love that had endured through the trials and tribulations. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. We were stronger together, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next.